Good afternoon, esteemed panel members and the
Good afternoon.
participants. On behalf of ASBM University, I welcome you all to this webinar. I request the participants to kindly mute their microphone and also the video. They can use the chat box for their questions. I have welcomed you on behalf of ASBM University. As a university, ASBM is new. It was established last year. But we carry a decade and a half old legacy of Asian School of Business Management. In fact, we used to conduct very regularly our conferences and seminars, but now because of this COVID situation, we have converted it to webinar, and this is the eighth in the series. SBM University, as I told you, was established last year, and we offer new-based programs. We offer traditional programs, of course, like MBA, BBA, MCOM, BCom, PhD, etc. But we also offer new-based programs like MBA in Business Analytics, MBA in LSCM, MBA semester abroad with the University of Nottingham, Malaysia, BBA e-commerce, MA and BA in Communication and Digital Media. Now coming to our subject today, banking in India today and tomorrow. Banking in India is as old as civilization. And the evidence of banking and our Jatakas, see, 5th century BCE and Kautilya Arthashastra, 4th century BCE, they mention about interest. Similarly, trade finance was very much there during the Maurya dynasty, during the Gupta age, and also during the Mughal era. Banking, as you know today, or modern banking, it came to India in the late 18th century with the establishment of Bank of Hindustan in 1770 and General Bank of India in 1786. Unfortunately, both of are not there now. The presidency banks, Bank of Calcutta, Bank of Bombay, Bank of Madras, they were established in the first half of the 19th century, and we know now them as State Bank of India. India, as you know, is a vast country, it's complex in nature, and so is Indian banking. I'll give you a very simple example. We have commercial banks, we have private banks, we have public sector banks, we have foreign banks, we have regional rural banks, we have the cooperative structure, we have development banks, and added to that, we now have the new generation banks like local area bank, small finance bank, and payment bank. Indian banking, as you know, is dominated by the public sector. The 60% of market share goes to the public sector. And that is, of course, India has reaped the benefits out of the public sector banking. Banking at doorstep because of large scale of branch expansion, finance in large scale to agriculture, small and micro enterprises, financial inclusion. These you will not find elsewhere in the world. But over the years, our public sector banking has developed certain systemic weaknesses. And now, two major problems are plaguing the banking sector in India. One is mounting bad loans, like popularly known as NPA. Recovery and recycling fund is a primary importance in banking. And we have large-scale stressed assets. The second major problem that we find is frauds and other ethical issues. As I told you, public sector banking dominates the banking sector in India. So, attempt was made to consolidate public sector banking through mergers, restructuring, and privatization. You know, State Bank has been, the associate banks of State Bank were merged with SBI. Bharatiya Mahila Bank was merged with SBI. The experiment started with the State Bank of Saurashtra, merger of State Bank of Saurashtra, and it was completed in 2017. Last year, Vijaya Bank and Dena Bank were merged with Bank of Baroda, and this year you have seen a number of mergers like Oriental Bank of Commerce and United Bank with Punjab National Bank, Syndicate Bank with Canada Bank, Allahabad Bank with Indian Bank, Andhra Bank and Corporation Bank with Union Bank. So the number of public sector banks, which at one point of time were 27, it has reduced to 12. And the regional rural banks, which numbered 196 at one point of time, now they are at 56 only. And IDBI Bank has been privatized. Of course, the result is yet to be seen because the major mergers took place only this year, 1st April 2020. But In addition to the problems that banking used to face earlier, we now have a pandemic. It has added to the woes of the banking. And to do justice to this, to do justice to today's webinar, we have with us three eminent bankers. Our first speaker today will be Sri Amitabh Guha. He joined State Bank of Saurashtra in 1972. He held various responsibilities of increased criticality in the State Bank system. He was the managing director of two banks, State Bank of Travancore and State Bank of Hyderabad, and he was deputy managing director, inspection and management audit of State Bank of India till his superannuation in 2008. Then he served South Indian Bank for 6 years as the chairman. Now Mr. Guha serves on the boards of four companies as independent director. Our second speaker today is Sri Jyoti Ghosh. He has a long association of 4 decades with banking and finance. He held various important positions in State Bank Group, covering the entire gamut of commercial banking. He was managing director of State Bank of Bikaner and Jaipur. Then he had a stint in Bandhan Bank as senior advisor to the managing director. Now Mr. Ghosh is the deputy managing director of LSI Financial Services Limited. He has recently been inducted as a member of the Corporate Finance Task Force of CII. Our third eminent panel member today is Sri Yatindra Nadkarni. He has a banking career spanning long 25 years. He started with Bank of India, worked in different positions, including as Deputy Zonal Manager Marketing, shifted to Axis Bank, the third largest private sector bank in India, and worked at Priority Head, Time Head, Cluster Head, and Retail Head. Well, now he is with Equitas Small Finance Bank as Senior Vice President. So, with this, I welcome our esteemed panel members and I request our first speaker, Amitabh Guha, to present his thought on the present banking scenario and what is likely to happen after COVID-19. Welcome, Mr. Guha.
Thank you, Professor Roy. Professor Roy, my co-panelists, Mr. Jyoti Ghosh, Mr. Nadkarni, and the participants online who are attending the webinar today. This is my first engagement with the ASBM after I became the university. I have been associated with the business school for quite a while, but after it got the status of independent university, this is the first occasion I have to get associated. My congratulations to them, and I sincerely wish them all excellence in their academic pursuit in the future to come. Now, today's topic is Indian banking today and tomorrow. But I'm afraid I have to beat the mandate because you cannot think or speak of today without the legacy of yesterday. And it's more so in a complex situation like this, unless you speak in continuum or carrying the legacy of the past for which the impact is visible or seen now, I think it will be unfair to make an assessment of that. Like any other countries, particularly the developing countries, banking sector is a very critical, pivotal on which the whole economy evolves. And India is no exception. And the model of Indian banking, essentially of intermediary, has been predominant in the past, and notwithstanding the development we have seen in other verticals, is still continuity dominant intermediary and making fund available to the economic activity. Today, if we set aside for the time being the impact of COVID, we need to go back almost 13 quarters back, and we'll observe that there have been contracting GDP. In the Q3 of 2018, we had a GDP of 8.4%, but today Q4, it is only 4.4%. That itself signifies a tremendous amount of stress the bankers are having and the banking sector as such is having. Now, under this background and the background of COVID-19, IMF has estimated that the rate of degrowth for the current fiscal for India is going to be very high. and some of the experts, including the IMF, has put their growth in negative in 2021. I personally do not believe the situation is that bad. Situation is bad, but really not that bad. We might be able to have a positive line at the end of the year. My optimism comes from the fact agriculture segment is very well poised, giving the good bumper crop this year, giving the rainfall expected this year, and the other avenues which you have been seeing, agriculture is going to play a very pivotal role again in the overall economic growth. But the fact remains that there are challenges. There are huge challenges. Mr. Ghosh will be speaking about the NPA and recovery, but it will be necessary for me to give a brief profile of the quality of asset today. Now, India Rating and Research, they have said that this pandemic alone, impact of pandemic alone, is going to be a 1.65 lakh of crores of fresh addition to the NPA. And that takes a situation overall cumulative position of 4.5 lakh crore. Already our state's assets is 11% of the total debt outstanding. And if you take the added burden of the impact of COVID, then it's going to be almost 18%. The cost of advances is going to deteriorate from 3.5% to 4.25%. This scenario, Jyoti will be speaking to you, is a very challenging scenario and very challenging for the banks and the bankers who will be handling the situation. Now, RBI and Government of India has come out with some facilitating process. They have tried to introduce some enabling provisions. But if you have taken note of the whole package which have been announced by Reserve Bank of India or Government of India, essentially dependent on how the banks are going to implement it. Entire package, the government package, or the action to be initiated pursuant to the decision taken by Reserve Bank of India, except in one or two like CRR, most of the things are dependent on the banker. And because the last mile delivery has to be done by the branch manager. Notwithstanding the fact that government have been very generous, but no money have been allocated for this package out of the government fund, it is being estimated that money is going to be generated by provided by the bank. And there lies the big catch. If you have a look at the experts, if you have a look at the rating agencies, there's a lot of talk about the risk aversion. Bankers are not really taking the step they should take to really stimulate the economy. And my random speaking with my colleagues who are at the helm of the affair, there's a lot of reservation in pursuing the expectation of the government. The point is, risk aversion has not been something new; it is always there. But given the fact of a huge amount of NPA already in the books of the banks, the huge number of potential NPA, and we understand, of course, it's not in public knowledge, public domain, that loan made by Mudra under the Mudra package, Mudra products, things are not very good there, not very healthy there. Even in spite of most of the package the India ratings have done, they have done based on the study of 500 over-leveraged corporates. So you could imagine if you add up the SMEs, add up the small trade finance, you add up the MFI loans, things are going to be a big challenge. To me, it is necessary to do loaning immediately. Money has to be made available. Some of the bankers I spoke to, they say, so they're not many takers. And they're obviously to be many takers because nobody is sure what is going to happen when the pandemic is going to get over. Unless you know that. So nobody like to invest. It's very obvious. I was talking in the beginning that, there is an issue of risk management. How that is going to be. So when the bankers are concerned, one thing they have to vigorously, religiously do pursue the indication the policies given by Reserve Bank of India. But there will be expectation on my part that in the past we have seen bankers have been always a whipping boy to bail out industry bailout. I would not like to mention here, you will sound very nice, that even when the Yes Bank almost wanted to dump, it was a public sector bank was to come and rescue them. The question is a free enterprise. If you earn profit, you don't contribute anything to public exchequer. When you lose, why public exchequer or public sector bank will come and rescue you? That's a different story altogether. This was the topic of today. But the fact of the matter is that if the government wants the bankers and banks, particularly my bank manager's colleague, who will be the last mile of delivery, they have to be assured that there will be no syndrome of staff accountability when the loan goes back. In my career as a banker for 37 years, I have seen that when the government has come out, bankers have gone out and done their best. But when it comes to the account going back, it's accountable. So there is a need to revisit the accountability policy, and if the account goes back, the bench manager will not be accountable given a situation where they have complied with the given guidelines. For that matter, all banks have the SOP, standard operating procedures, where the credit is concerned. And I must say that of all the risk bankers pursue or follow, credit risk is the most solid compared to the other risks we have. And this I'm talking in the context of application and doing at the ground level. Credit policy is definitely quite robust, but somehow other it has been able to deliver the result it should in the context of good credit. And as you know that with almost 4.6 crores of lakh crores of NPA estimated, things are going to be very bad about it. Now, let's have a quick look what RBI has done. And RBI done as a prudence, making the liquidity available. Government of India has also come with a huge package, 20 lakh crore Atmanirbhar Bharat program. There are other package for SMEs, other package for agri. But if you have a critical look at it, everything is going to take time. We are talking of infrastructure, huge emphasis on infrastructure by Government of India and Reserve Bank of India. Infrastructure does not come up in days or months. It takes time. It takes months and years to come. We have talked about, for the first time, infrastructure in agriculture. We have talked about creation of infrastructure in mandi, in the farm gate and the aggregating points. Those are very critical, and those are going to support the banking system well. But they need to be done. They need to put in place, and they need to maintain and sustain. Creating is easy. Sustaining it for the effective result is very, very difficult. We have seen in the past so many schemes has come, so getting back to the core issue of the package, that it has to be delivered by the banks. Today I was reading an interview of Mr. Kamath. He's one of the pioneer banker, not only India at international level also. He also making such observation that banks should keep money. Now banks are asking, where are the takers? The question today, if you have a look at it, MFI funded units, but it's very small traders, small artisans, where recovery was close to 97-98%. That recovery has come down. And there is a cycle, and this is the time they need money. Unless the bankers or any other agencies, MFIs or NBBF, reaches to them, the green shoot we are talking about, or the PM talked about the other day, is not going to have any consequence in the long run. So we need to do our action points. If two term, one is short term, what we need to do immediately, say for the purpose of fiscal up to 31st March 21, another is long term, where infrastructure, capital. Second point coming to that there is not of changes going to come post-COVID. We do not know when it's going to get over, but I'm not too hopeful about working from home. That methodology, how much it will be applicable for the bankers, where there is hand-on and field actions. You have to be on the ground really to perform and to deliver. To what extent we can relocate the work to work from home, which has a potential of economy, which has potential of efficiency, but those are the matter of deliberation, and those are the matter of deliberation for long term. When I when I speak of long term, I'm talking of a timeline of 2 to 3 years. But our immediate need is to make the fund flow to the needy one who immediately needs it. If it does not happen, I think this fiscal possibly will end up with a negative growth as envisaged by IMF. Now, Professor Roy talked about a merger. You know, I'm not a great votary of merger because of a couple of reasons. We have seen in the past, and merger should necessarily take place out of the market compulsions, not of the compulsions of government or Nirmala Sitaraman or P. Chidambaram. In our history of merger, if you have seen that either it has happened in the instance of the Reserve Bank of India, bank failed, some other bank took over. We have seen the case of uh, uh, banks taking place. We have seen the latest case of Yes Bank, which have been supported by State Bank of India. Okay, but the fact of the matter is that unless the market forces catalyze the merger, that merger never become commercially successful. Let me give an example to you. My own bank, State Bank Group. State Bank Group got merged in April 2017. Two more banks, Associated Bank, got merged earlier. One got merged earlier, the State Bank of Saurashtra got merged in 13th of August 2008. Subsequent to that, State Bank of Indore got merged. But major portion of Associate Bank got merged in April 2017. You know. Now, pre-merger period, State Bank of India and Associate Bank put together had a market share close. Initially, it used to be 28%. Slowly, it came down to 26%. But I understand that as of now, the latest position is that State Bank enjoys 25%, 24% of the total liability and 25% total credit after almost 2.5 years of merger. In spite of the fact that there had been a planned structure, closure, or rationalization of 2,500 branches since April 2017. And pre-merger of Associate Bank, 3,000 employees took DRS. And that has not really facilitated, enhanced broad-based the profitability of the bank. Of course, there are reasons of NPA, which has really, impacted whatever the positives have been done in the State Bank pre-merger. Now, getting to the merger of State Bank of India, there was a common IT platform. Though there are certain sort of, customization made at the individual banks level, but overall platform was much uniform when you compare to other nationalized banks which are going to get merged now. Number one. Number two, State Bank of India being a single bank now, are leverage more faster, more broad-based way. All the
Mr. Guhas,
in place. Yeah.
sorry for the interruption.
Okay. Give me 2 minutes. I'll come back. Give me 2 minutes. I'll
Sure.
come.
Thank you. Thank you.
To give me 2 minutes. So merger must have some. If I one plus one does not make 2.5, I don't think it's effective merger. 1 plus 1 should make 3 ideally. If it does not make at least 2.5, 1 plus 1 merger make it 2. Why should I merge at all in the first place? The challenges for the public sector nationalized bank is going to be the platform, the culture. State Bank of India is one, uniformity or consistency of the staff. They are State Bank Group. But here what has happened, I won't take the name of the bank. Here it happened that, MD from Bank of Baroda, general manager from United Bank of India or other bank, and that has created a lot of disconnect. And I am sharing what I heard from Horses Small, MD of a bank, Calcutta-based bank. Okay, those are the challenges are there. If we can really take care of the challenges, and it is a big challenge we have. And if you can really make merger 1 plus 1, 2.5, if not 2.5, if it's more the merrier 3, I think then we have a good time ahead. But up to 2001 is full of uncertainty. Government has to be as sincere as the bankers want to be. Unless there is a complete connect between the government and the implementing level, I don't find the economy is going good in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Guha. Thank you very much for a lucid exposition. NPA, we know, is a very critical issue for the banks. And now the banks are under greater stress due to COVID-19 and the moratorium on bank loans for 6 months. I'll give a simple example. RBI estimates that rupees 38.68 lakh crore of bank loans are now under moratorium. 65% of Bank of Baroda's loans are under moratorium, 65 to 70% of IDBI Bank's loans under moratorium, and 90%, I repeat, 90% of microfinance of Bandhan Bank are under moratorium now. In this situation, I would request now our second speaker, Sri Jyoti Ghosh, to share his thoughts on recovery issues, viability of banks, and impact on the economy. Welcome, Mr. Ghosh.
Thank you, Professor Rai. My respect to Professor Rai and Dr. Obijit from ASBN for having given me this opportunity to speak in this occasion. My respect to Sri Guha. I would say sir because sir was indirectly my boss at SPG also. He was heading with that at that point of time. And it is a long association with him. And Sri Nadkarni, an avid banker, what I gathered. My association with ASBN goes back to 10 years, since 2010 when I got posted in State Bank of Hyderabad when I was in recovery. And it has strengthened over time. And I'm really grateful that we have been providing various opportunities to the young students, professors, etc., whereby I also get a lot of inputs for my lectures and all. It's a two-way interaction. Guha sir has already laid the foundation and spoken at length on the various issues on Indian banking, with special emphasis also on risk management, which, as he has very correctly guided us, there should be a super session of risk management, because ultimately that is what makes or breaks a bank. Once you are aware of this, hitting a bank, you can take corrective actions. So that is a very essential thing which he has pointed out. And I would not go into most of the topics which sir has touched because he has dealt with it. So let me start off. The whole concept of non-performing asset started in 1992. At that point of time, I was stationed in Bhattacharya, which is around 45 kilometers from Varanasi. And what was this annual rate of pay? Earlier, we used to have high interest. Interest never got paid. Merely the profits were booked, and everything was hunky. Then started the policy of identification by RBI. We have come a long way. Definitions got changed when the account is identified as an at present asset is an asset, including a lease when it ceases to generate income for the bank. In very simple terms, I have put it. Interest and installment or installment of principal if it remains unserviced and overdue for a period of 90 days is applicable to term loan, and all this is available on the Reserve Bank of India guideline of asset classification commissioning norms of 2016 June. I will not repeat. It takes care of cash credits and goes into equally securitization derivatives, agri advances, also has treasury products fully. So it in lieu of where the bank is lending money whether by way of investments or whether by way of or cash credit. The instructions are very clear. Every year in 4 quarters, we continue identifying NPAs and going forward to recover. There are certain rules and regulations for NPA. I'll just digress a bit. There are 4 kinds of assets. Standard asset, which is a performing asset which pays you interest and installment, EMI, or whatever you see on time. And it is not NPA at all. Then comes the substandard asset. One of the first category where it is paying and servicing interest installment EMI paying you for 90 days. It picks up only 90 days by the system. Thereafter, it stays there as a substandard asset if there is no other negativity seen, like fraud, or total deterioration, all securities, and collateral and security coming when it automatically migrates to a lost asset, and you have to provide. After substandard, you have got the category 1 year after substandard. It comes to asset category.
Mr. Ghosh.
Hello.
Mr. Ghosh, I think 2 instruments are switched on at your end. Kindly switch off one to avoid this noise. I think 2 laptops or 2 instruments have been switched on. Kindly switch off, mute the mic of one. Thank you. Thank you. Yes, please go ahead. Kindly unmute one of the microphones. Mr. Ghosh, I think there is some problem.
Hello.
Ghosh sir.
Ghosh sir.
Please
Unmute your microphone.
Not audible actually.
Not audible actually, sir.
Mr. Ghosh, both the microphones are muted.
Now is it okay?
Yeah. Now you are very much audible.
Now only one mic is on?
Yeah, please go ahead.
This thing open, I switched it off. Sorry.
Thank
Now coming to doubtful assets all over again. It has got a 3-year tenor, the asset continues as a doubtful asset for 3 years. Thereafter migrates to a loss asset where you have to provide 100% of your exposure. And that is a huge hit on the bank's bottom line. The net profit obviously will be hit. As I mentioned earlier, even a standard asset on discovery of a fraud can migrate straight away from the standard position to a loss asset because every security happens to be wiped off and the bank loans becomes uncovered, clean, and it has to be 100% provided for. Now, an interesting fact is that Taking the data from August 13, 2013, the NPA was just below 6%, more or less, for all scheduled commercial banks, GNPA obviously, and it went up in the year 2019 right up to 9.1%. There was a huge hit. Identification by asset quality review, which started in the year 2016 by Reserve Bank of India, ended up in identification of lot of irregular assets as actually NP across the board, across the industries, big, small, whatever you say, whichever kind of asset, it got picked up as per Reserve Bank of India guidances given to the banks from time to time. The non-performing assets as on February 20 for the public sector bank stood at 7.27 crores. As per a report, this data harks back to September 2019. It has reduced, obviously, as per Reserve Bank of India's governor's address to the State Bank of India conclave organized by SBI, Banking and Economic Conclave. It is there on the RBI site. You can have a look at it. Now, the extreme rise in NPAs obviously set in motion a lot of things. The foremost thing of significance was the corrective action plan started by Reserve Bank of India to provide the banks with an opportunity of coming back to being a lending bank again. A lot of lending was stopped. A lot of investment was stopped. Actually, I would not be wrong if I term it as a phase of narrow banking, in which a bank in trouble can only invest in government securities, which are gilt-edged and 100% safe. I think around 11 banks were identified for corrective action plan. Many banks, after the identification, were called to make a presentation to Reserve Bank of India, the central office, and they were guided that how they should manage their balance sheet and address the recovery of loans which had gone bad to bring back the banks into profit. And I think 4 banks had come out of the corrective action plan. This happened over a period of 1.5 years to 2 years. Now, there was an easing of non-performing assets over a period of time because of a lot of stringency. And last 3 years, the level of GNPA slowly came down. Now, gross non-performing asset of the bank, it started coming down also because of the start of insolvency and bankruptcy code, the NCLT as we casually call it. There were settlements in NCLT. I'll just go there straight away. More or less, number of cases were 7,548, and as on March 2020, top 6 settlements were Bhushan Steel, JP, Electro Steel, Amtech, Monnet Ispat, and the cherry of the thing was SR. SR was an exceptionally good settlement, and 42,000 crore of recovery was done for the banking system as a whole. State Bank of India, if I'm not mistaken, recovered a sum of 12,000 crore. And this happened, I think, just before the March closure. So NCLT came in and over 7,500, 600 cases were lodged. Then what happened? Another hit. While the NPA was handled more or less, or rather how to handle it was decided progress, slow but sure progress was happening, recovery was happening, we got hit by COVID, which put a huge spanner in the work. COVID, I'll come again later, but what happened that it also had implications on the NCLT, new admittance of cases. Already referred cases which were not admitted will be admitted, but new references will be stopped for the next 3 to 6 months, depending on what the government finally decides. At present, it is stopped. You cannot admit new cases or refer new cases. Old cases which are waiting for admittance, which have already been referred to, will be admitted slowly. But the whole effect on COVID, one is admittance for resolution. Second is the lockdown, etc., which is hampering resolution because you don't get meetings, you don't, there are certain things which you need to talk face to face, which is not happening. Our company LSI Financial, that is the flagship, we have got a LSI resolution company as a fully owned subsidiary. Now the thing is that we are waiting for resolution to happen, admissions to happen, for meetings to happen so that we can take things to their logical conclusion. There we have a huge question mark, even though things have started again, but to gain back momentum, what we left behind before closure, before COVID, it will take a bit of time. Coming back to Reserve Bank of India dispensations, June 2019 was a watershed decision of RBI. They did away with all the other resolution processes of NPAs. CDR went for a 6-year. Whatever was there, they said, sorry, everything stands withdrawn. Now we have one-time settlement. That is, if you have 100 rupee outstanding, you go to a bank, you prove to them that you cannot give more than 50 rupees, bank accepts, you pay 50 rupees, you are given a clean sheet. Your slate is clean. Then comes restructuring. For viable units in all kinds of industries, popping in a bit of cash with some, capital being thrown in by the promoter director, certain, tenors being tweaked. If a restructuring can happen and the company be brought back to be a performing asset, that is still on. Thereafter, the banks are permitted to sell to asset restructuring companies as well. ARCs buy the asset, they either sell it after a 2-year wait or they can run it with the help of some promoter till they find a market to sell it. All the rules and regulation of Reserve Bank of India, I cannot quote for paucity of time, and they are quite, exhaustive. IBC, I have already mentioned that IBC was slow in starting, but the recovery rate of NCLTs, was always a question mark. Average recovery hill, moves between 18% to around 25-30% of the total exposure of a bank. Therefore, some of the banks nowadays prefer one-time settlement or sale to ARCs where they obviously find a better price and they can, get back some more rather than, write off 70%, 75%. Now, I'll just quickly sum up with COVID. COVID-19 has been termed as a black swan event. This black swan event was, popularized by Nassim Nicholas Taleb, a finance professor and writer and former Wall Street trader. What happened? Everything what was not supposed to happen happened. Industries closed down because of labor issues. Infection spread to the labor. There was lockdown everywhere. Industries just shut down. Production stopped. Loans could not be repaid. EMIs could not be paid by the B segment borrowers, retail borrowers. It was across the whole gamut of financing except agriculture to a degree. Spot on, and agriculture is doing even well now in comparison to the other three: MSME, large loans, and the retail banking sector. Now, what happened? The labor went back. There was huge unemployment. There was huge loss of life, and there was loss of income because all companies cannot keep on paying to their labor, white collar workers as well. 50% cut has been announced by top corporates of India because they cannot sustain. Nobody has got that sort of a deep pocket to sustain continuously paying out without any income whatsoever. Example I'll give you, my personal example. My brothers run a school in Bhagalpur. Today morning, I was talking to them. They said we have sustained 3 salaries without taking any fees. Now, bhaiya, it is impossible for us to keep on paying without taking fees. Some schools in Kolkata have stopped internet, procedure for teaching because they have not been allowed to take any fees. The teachers have also stopped teaching. So all the
Mr. Ghosh, I'm sorry. Mr. Ghosh, I'm sorry. That time, please.
yeah, I'll just sum up.
Thank you. Thank you.
Now, the stress on the banking industry was already there. As Guha sir has said earlier, it got reduced because of PCA, got reduced because of Reserve Bank of India, various guidelines happening, recovery happening, NCLT happening. Unfortunate, COVID again put the clock back to a large degree. And COVID will not only, add in large loans, NPA and all, it would drill down to retail banking. Simple housing loans will also start going back after the 3-month and 2-month or 3-month extension because people are without income. My presentation on COVID is there. Now, just a short this thing, NBFCs were also parallelly financing. NBFCs had a huge bad time because of ILFC. Liquidity was in real short supply. Banks were not interested in taking an exposure on many of the NBFCs. That triggered repayment problems for NBFCs. Reserve Bank of India has come out with, I think, a total of 75,000 crore of assistance, liquidity schemes. They have made it available to NBFCs. But the impact of NBFCs again would be bad because of the COVID virus and the loans actually not coming back. You cannot keep on pushing in money without return of money. That's the one-way street. So the faster the resolution of the COVID problem is done, the faster the banks and the NBFCs start earning income, getting back the loans as per scheduled installments and EMIs, the faster the economic system will settle back to near normal. I presume, it's a guess, it would take another 6 months to 9 months for things to go back to pre-COVID days. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ghosh, for this lucid exposition. Our third speaker, Sri Yatindra Nadkarni, has a unique experience of public sector, private sector, and news and banking of small finance bank. In fact, the first 2 speakers are from the public sector, whereas Mr. Nadkarni is from the extreme other end of the spectrum. He will now tell us the role played by the new kinds of banks and their operational issues. Mr. Nadkarni, please.
Thank you, sir. So, Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Deva Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Para Brahma Tasmai Shri Guru Namaha. Sadar Naman to my banking guru, one of my banking gurus, who is here right now. Yes, Vice Chancellor, SBM, Professor Kalyan Shankar Rai sir. My regards to Guha sir and Ghosh sir, and would like to thank for enriching deliberations. Fantastic. A lot of learnings, in fact. And thanks to all participants as well. So I would like to start with one quote that the change is the only constant thing in the world. Change is inevitable. And what we have observed, and no one is an exception as well, banking industry. In fact, if you just start with pre-nationalization era, in fact, sir has spoken about banking history as well. Am I audible? Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yeah. So pre-nationalization era, then nationalization of the banks, then RRB, then new private sector banks like SDFC, ICICI, UTI, which is now Axis Bank and all, and now, Payments Bank as well as Small Finance Bank, local area banks. Yes. Before coming to the role, I would like to speak about some challenges which actually earlier speakers have spoken about. There are a lot of challenges with this pandemic, but at the same time, I'm somewhat optimistic, always optimistic. That's why what I feel, every challenge always comes with some opportunities. Yes, there are a lot of opportunities also in future. This is one dark night which will be followed by a bright day very soon. In fact, let us keep the hope. So right now, the question is, as far as the role is concerned, so the role of Payments Bank and Small Finance Bank is concerned. So these banks came in existence because of one very known committee on comprehensive financial services, which is led by Mr. Nachiket Moore. So comprehensive financial services for small businesses and low-income households. So somewhat on this basis, on the basis of recommendation of this committee, actually, these banks came into the existence. Yeah, there are many public sector banks as well as other private sector banks serving to the people, serving to the community. But at the same time, there is a need of a small finance banks and payments bank because these banks are coming into existence with a better technology with focus on low-cost operations. So if we'll speak about the low-cost operations, then obviously one thing come into the mind, and that is digitalization. So as I started with the changes, so you will remember there was a time, a manual, when it was complete manual banking. So a customer at that time, the customer was a customer of a specific counter. Then it shifted to ALPMs. Still, the customer was the customer of a specific counters. Then it is shifted to Cybex. Then customer became the customer of a branch. After Cybex, the technology has introduced core banking solutions, and with the core banking solutions, customer has become customer of the bank, a specific bank. No one knows. Like in telecommunication, maybe in future, there will be portability and customer will become a customer of any bank. Which bank? I don't know. No, that will not matter as well. So I will come to the role of this specific segment of these banks, Payments Bank and Small Finance Bank. So to play their role, they have to ensure that they will fit on the four pillars of digitalization. 4 pillars of digital transformation, I will say. 4 pillars of digital transformations, yes, because in service industry there are three basic things, basic pillars. One is people, one is product, one is process. So these 4 pillars of digital transformations also link to these three things: people, product, and process. So in people, yes, obviously internal customer as well as external customers, means employee as well as our customers. Okay? So first pillar, which is very important. And with this introduction, what I feel in future, hierarchies will be demolished. Hierarchies will be 100% demolished because digitization will take place, and a lot of hierarchies which are there in the system since long are going to be demolished. Maybe soon, maybe it may take time as well. So 4 pillars: empowerment of employees. That is the most important thing. And here I would like to request SBM as well. They can play a fantastic role here because for empowerment of employees, right now what is lacking is skills development and skills management. I hope with the coming in the coming days, our schools, colleges, and maybe some finishing school kind of thing will be introduced. Some skill development, skill management schools will be introduced, which will take care of these things before anyone coming into the real life. So all the students will go through these things, and those skilled people will be the real asset of our country. So, but at present time, what I feel, we have to work on empowerment of employees. So for that, skill development and knowledge updation is very important. Agility is the most important quality, has to be ensured all the time. Then second part, which comes with customer relationship management. Customer relationship management, and so engagement with the customers. That is the second pillar of digital transformation. Because with proper engagement and to keeping them abreast with the technology which is taking place, and to sensitize them with the risks associated with all these things, is very important thing which banks must take care. Next is optimization of operations. So optimization of operations, yes, as I started with low cost operations. I will come back to this point. With this low cost operations, and digitalization, one important thing which come into the mind of a banker, like specifically I will speak about small finance banks. I have some capital. Now I have to ensure, I have to understand where should I deploy it, because that is limited. I must keep capital adequacy ratio of 15%. With this limited capital, whether should I deploy it in branch banking, in for bringing more branches, or should I deploy it in the digitalization, in technology? Because at the time, along with the technology, a lot of risk also come into the system, and to mitigate that risk, I have to again deploy a lot of funds, lot of money to ensure that. Hello, am I audible? To ensure that the risk can be mitigated. Yeah. And last but the most important thing is transformation of products. Transformation of products, because here I can just share some practical examples. Equitas Small Finance Bank is the first bank who has ensured from the 1st of January 2020, we done away with the non-maintenance charges. It was a big step because revenue stream, we decided to cut a revenue stream completely. So this is one example. There might be a lot of so many examples like that. I will not speak about that because the paucity of the time I can see that. So uh, I would like to close it with the future. See, if we just go look back and go ahead, that is in banking. पीछे देख आगे बढ़. That we started learning in the banking, in fact. So hello.
Yes,
Yes, sir, you are audible.
yes, sir, you're audible.
You're
Yeah.
audible. You're audible.
So if we look back, we can see a lot of changes. And now with the digital, we have to ensure we are up, we are going ahead with the proper technology, and at the same time to ensure that there is a proper risk mitigant, because we have to take care of privacy of data, secrecy of data, and encryption as well. So, looking at the paucity of time, I will stop here and would like to thank all of you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Narkadi,
Thank
for
you.
the practical examples that you have given. Now, we'll come to the question and answer session. We have received a number of questions, and our first question goes to Mr. Guha. In fact, there are two questions. The first one is, how will COVID impact private banks and RRBs? And second one is, can merger of banks result in a reduction in NPA? Mr. Guha, please.
Well, let me take up the second question first. That is NPA. It really does not. It really does not. Merger does not automatically ensure the quality of the assets. Okay, and you must appreciate a point. There is a period of incubation or period of stabilization when a merger is taking place. Suppose, State Bank of India, when took over what was State Bank of Hyderabad, State Bank of Hyderabad, huge amount of NPA. And those are the accounts continued for some time. Only thing, what happens is, if the stronger bank is there, they have the capability to sustain capital adequacy and profitability part of it. So merger per se does not automatically improve, but it facilitates to sustain and improve it over a period of time. Now, second point is, and if you have a look at it now, Central Bank and Dena Bank that got merged, giving the type of loan assets, bad loan assets Central Bank has or Dena Bank has, and unless you write them off or go for compromise with a huge haircut, there's no way, of addressing the issue. Mr. Ghosh talked about NPA coming down, but the question is, if you have a look at it, 17, 18, 19, particularly 16, 17, 18, the type of compromises the bankers did, the amount written off by your haircut is a huge, thousands of crores. The question is that to clean my balance sheet or clean my book, if I go on offering the haircut and hit my capital or hit my future or potential profitability, and that's not the right way of doing it. Now, as regards the COVID impact, honestly, I'm not sure, because nobody really knows how long the COVID is going to continue. That's the issue. But some of the slides Mr. Ghosh presented here, and there, that's it, where the experts or bankers agree that is going to a slow process of recovery. Is going to slow process of recovery. Economists have debated whether it's going to be V, L, or W, but it's likely V. It will come down, again go up, again go down. So COVID impact, I just like to tell you small way. I'm an independent director in a company who manufactured, automobile parts. So last year the company had a turnover of 2,000 crores with a net profit, not cash profit, net profit of 130 crores. This year the turnover was 1100 crores with a profit of only 19 crores. Okay. Things have come in the corporate sector. Take any big name, senior executives are taking huge cut, 20-25% cut in their pay package. I know a couple of good big companies, possibly to be a measure of token, but even the independent director has taken a 20% cut on their sitting fees, which is not very big sum, but it makes sense to be on the same page as the employees and other employees getting cut on the salary. So my understanding of the situation is that it will take time. I'm not seeing anything happening in the Q2. Something might happen. Q2 will make the beginning, but you will get a picture, emergence of picture in Q3 and Q4. But it will definitely spill over in 2021 when you can expect a pre-COVID situation, but not in 2021. Yes, Mr. Roy?
The other question was how will COVID impact private banks and RRBs?
Come again?
How will COVID impact private banks and RRBs? Is there any difference compared to the commercial banks?
I mean, COVID has been very democratic. We do not spare anybody. Amitabh Bachchan has, my rickshaw has also impacted positive. So impact will be very democratic and uniform. But you have to appreciate that large banks and private RRBs have a limited financial muscle. If the impacts will be much higher compared to other banks, but given their portfolio, nature of portfolio and activity, I feel that impact will be recoverable and they'll be able to recover much faster than the larger private sector banks.
Thank you, Mr. Gula. Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Now we have two questions for Mr. Jyoti Ghosh. The first one is, we all know COVID has adversely affected the employment situation. There is no money in the hands of the people, which leads to low consumption. It leads to low market demand. You will not have any incentive to produce. It will lead to further unemployment and reduction in income, even low tax collection for the government. It's a classic example of a vicious cycle. Recovery of the economy now needs clear market demand, and we have to get money in the hands of the people to increase private expenditure and break the vicious cycle. This is possible through generation of employment. So the first question for Mr. Ghosh is, what banks can do to generate employment, revive the economy? The second question is related to that. What is the impact of COVID on banking jobs? Mr. Ghosh, please.
Right. I'll take effect on banking jobs first. At present, I don't think the banks will be hiring that much. Already State Bank of India has deferred their hiring plans. I read it in the papers. And especially after merger, what has happened before merger, 5 associates. After the first phase of mergers of State Bank of Saurashtra and Indore in 2009 and even before. Thereafter, it took a long time for the other 5 of the associate banks to be merged. But the situation, if you recall, say you take Fort, PM Road, Bombay. All the associate had branches. SBI had 2-3 branches across various corners. So after merger, SBI was settled with 8-9 branches within a radius of 1 kilometer. Now that they have already reduced. Staff is already excess because branches have been shut down or merged with the SBI branch. It has happened in Kolkata. I presume it has happened in Bhubaneswar, but Bhubaneswar had very little of associate banks presence. It has happened in the south. It has happened in Patna. It has happened in Kolkata. Various of the branches which I had inaugurated have been shut down. 4 of them in Kolkata. Because merger has demanded this. The same place you have 4 branches, you cannot keep on sustaining all 4. Business will also not sustain. So merge staff excess, staff as well as officers. So that is one reason why largest recruiter in the banking system, that is State Bank of India, will definitely not recruit. Thereafter, the COVID effect would be that fresh branches in new areas which were unbanked or less banked, etc., which I presume have been identified, those will obviously be deferred for very obvious reasons, that they would find very little of labor, very little of contractors willing to finish the bank branch and make it operational. So that is another reason. Third is investments are large in opening brick and mortar branches. With net profit, of most of the banks taking a hit because of, deferment of interest and EMI repayment. Thereafter, loan book not growing, etc. I don't think banks would be interested in increasing their presence immediately. So my take on employment of the banks, at the banks, I think would be deferred for at least 6 months before things stabilize a bit. As Bua sir said that fourth quarter movement should start. I had in my earlier address very clearly mentioned that it would be probably the third or rather the fourth quarter, because all the expectations of the COVID reducing or going away, wishful thinking, never happened. And at least in Kolkata, I am finding it pretty dangerous. I will not quote any figures because I'm not going into that. So employment by the banks would be very restrictive and very restricted. They may take on specialist cadre officers on retirement of the existing specialist cadre. But the general cadre bank officer who sits in the branch or does the deposit, etc., etc. I'm speaking for public sector banks mostly because I have worked in 5. And also I have worked for about 1.5 years. Their recruitment policy is slightly different. Their way of banking is totally different. So microfinance at Bandhan requires a huge staff strength. But then there also, at present, they are not recruiting that much because of the 3-month moratorium for repayment and all. As Professor Rai already said that their loan book comprises 90% or so. Actually, it has come down. It is the microfinance book has come down, but then if you add the finance part which they have taken over from HDFC, Grow Finance, then they are also lending to micro. So, ultimately, if I analyze properly, it has not come down that much. Their exposure in MSME has grown definitely. It started growing when I was there. More or less, I was driving it for some time. Large loans, again, they are very picky and choosy. So I don't think much will be generated, employment will be generated from even the MFI banking institutions or MFI this thing because of the stress, obviously. Now, the other private sector banks, I think that employment generation in the private sector banks would also take a hit because of the lack of opening of branches. And, it would be, skeletal staff running the show for some time more, minimum 6 months. All branches will not be open. Everybody will not come to work every day. All sorts of, permutations and combinations are there. But a wild guess, I wouldn't say. A wide guess, I would say that till 6 months more, I don't think it would be seen that there are very large scale recruitments. So, taking on the first question, I think can you please repeat the first question, Professor Rai?
Yeah, Mr. Ghosh. The other question is, what can banks do now to generate employment and revive the economy?
That's a very good question. Now, let me go back to basic economics. None of us were there in the 1930s depression, but the depression phase, which lasted during the 1930s, we had Lord Milton Keynes and the Keynesian economic theory came into practice. Actually, people laughingly refer to that Keynes had propounded that you ask the labor class who are unemployed to dig holes in the morning and fill them back again in the evening and pay them for doing that. Funny, yes, but then that payment which was happening, that was putting purchasing power in the hands of the blue-collar labor class. What did they do with the purchasing power? They went and made demand for goods. Demand for goods did what? That started manufacturing activities. Manufacturing activities required labor again. Manufacturing activists started employing again. Then those people also started spending. So technically it was an upward spiral for employment and generation of income and spending. We exactly need to do that, and we are doing that since long. The Manrega program is part of that thinking. You get an amount of, I think now it is 200 rupees plus a day. And they do small work of shifting earth, moving earth from here to there, doing earth buns, etc. for rivers and all. But ultimately, what happens, it is putting purchasing power, but in a very limited fashion. Right? Skilled and semi-skilled, all are not being employed, especially when all the industries are shut. So that is a huge problem which needs to be addressed. Out of 100, if you employ 10 only, 90 are still unemployed. So to reduce that unemployment for skilled labor and unskilled labor, I think personally the government should push for infra, because government investment in infra, construction, etc., not only demands unskilled labor, skilled labor, white collar, all three types, it also demands funds. It also generates infrastructure, would generate demand for cement, iron and steel, and you can build up on this. All that will put purchasing power in the hand of the people, and construction of road, etc., would also aid the same thing. Because I am into, our company is managing on behalf of NHAI 7 road projects, collections, etc., fully finished road projects. We are getting complaints that the repair staff for the road, it's a continuous process because there is continuous repair going on because of wear and tear. People have run away. What happened, or rather what went wrong as per my personal opinion, was that when the migration of labor started because of lack of income back to the home states. At that point of time, the states from where the labor was moving, they should have set up centers to take care of the needs of the labor, camps, food, clothing, bedding, etc. should have been provided so that the labor would not shift out. Now, getting the labor back is another huge problem. My home state was Bihar till some years back. I was speaking to some of my friends who are doing microfinance business there. They said there is a surfeit of people demanding loans here who have come back from Gujarat, the Diamond Hub, come back from Maharashtra. They have come back from Punjab, who were agricultural laborers there. Because Punjab, survives on Bihar and UP labor. The agriculture laborer there is very little bit Punjabis. They're all migrating from Bihar, etc. Kolkata, West Bengal, the jewelry, the labor involved, skilled labor who are employed by jewelers, they are from Kolkata, they are from Bihar. So all they have migrated back. So the effect is that most of the industries which were labor intensive are in serious problem. This matter, what you ask banks, we can, do lots of types of loans, 20,000, 50,000, etc., etc. But the main driver would be the large-scale industry and mid-corp, who actually generate employment, getting them back the infrastructure construction, and wherever agriculture laborers have fled, they need to be supported. Small should-put loans of 50,000, 70,000, etc. are not going to go a big way. It's not going to generate income. It's not going to do much. You need sustained income to go forward. Another point I'll touch here, that people expect that continuous lowering of the interest rate will obviously generate loan offtake. It doesn't happen. I recall I was chief dealer of SVBJ, Forex dealer at the point of time in 1998-99. Japan kept on reducing interest till it reached a low equilibrium level. You cannot keep on, going down. People will not take. It's like, getting satiated. You love rasgullas, you have one, you have two. Can you have 30, 40, 50? It doesn't happen. You need to think out of the box and do something very, very seriously. Today I was reading FICCI's, column. They were very, very, pessimistic. They said March 21, the GDP growth rate will be negative at 4.5%. Even Mr. Shaktikanta Das lecture at SBI, he also has expressed doubts about the growth rate. But if COVID, and let us take what Sir has said, sir, that COVID is not going to spare anyone, and neither is it going to go away so soon. It's a way of life. It has become a way of life. We will have to live with it. And to live with it, we need to innovate and ensure that the growth is driven not from should-put advances, but sustained growth is generated by large-scale industries, government investment. The whole idea was floated by Milton Friedman some, I think, decades back, that only pushing purchasing power in the hands by Keynesian economics does not sustain. You need large-scale investments by the government. So all that has to be done and planned in such a manner, sector-wise, segment-wise, industry-wise, what is necessary, that is what is required to be done by the Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Commerce. Railways, who were the largest probably generator of organized sector employment, also they have already privatized some trains. If you see, disguised unemployment was there in Air India. Other private airlines, if they use 20, workers to service the plane after a flight has landed, Air India, if I recall rightly, it was 250 plus on one plane. That also has to be gone in. Everywhere you need to optimize. And the biggest challenge is the growth rate of the population. That also, I think we should have a look, because we are not having much for capital formation left after the consumption is over. So I'll rest my answer on that. So it has to be, as I'll just sum up, interest rate lowering will help, has helped. Small loans has helped, will help. But as a driver of the economy, you need large-scale investments, large loans to be disbursed, large industries to be functioning again, employment to be generated. It's a spiral where everything is a part. Thank you.
Succinct explanation. Now I come to Mr. Nadkarni, Yatindra Nadkarni. Now, brick and mortar banking has taken a backseat now during the pandemic due to lockdowns and social distancing norms. So, the question for you is, how banks are coping with this situation through use of technology, introduction of apps and automation?
Well, so the question is whether brick and mortar banking has taken a backseat now during the pandemic. So what I feel, not in the pandemic, in fact, brick and mortar has started taking backseat maybe almost 5 years back with the introduction of apps as well, and yes, wallets, So I have some data for the proof. There is a proof, in fact. I can just share some data as well. Yes, in India, it started down But in Europe, since 2016, almost 9,000 branches are closed. Though bankable population is same, people using banking, uh, they're they're doing banking transactions using banking system are the same, actually increased, but branches are decreasing. At the same time, there is an study of Boston Consultancy Group that nowadays 84% of American bankable population is not going to any bank branch. They are not going to any branch. They are doing all banking through their apps. So in India as well, a big example, Paytm. And again, if I'll just compare it with the footfalls in the banks, it is, as of now, decreased to one-third of what it would have been in 2015. So footfalls is already decreased by almost two-thirds. There is a big proof. So now, how banks are coping with this situation through use of technology. So I'll come to that point, and that is very interesting. Here again, there are very interesting facts. Yes, pandemic is, I can I can say, it's blessings in disguise in a way, in a specific way, because it accelerated. It has been accelerated already. Digitalization in the banks. It accelerated like anything. I will share some examples, some data, not exactly data, but some examples of what we did in Equitas Small Finance Bank. So Q4 of any financial year is always the highest business for any bank. Maximum business is done in Q4. What number of acquisitions we did in Q4 2019-20 through our old system, through maybe TED banking, through face-to-face interaction and all, is maybe X figures, maybe X numbers. Now in Q1 of this, due to this pandemic situation, we have come up with some product innovation. We have come up with a special product that is known as Selfie, where we are sending, like our team members, our employees are sending some link to the customers, to the prospects, to the prospective customers, and they can open account using that link, because now KYC can be done. It is also digitalized. Aadhaar is there, PAN card is there, and IT department complete data is also on the system, that is online available. So we can open account online. That is Selfie through the link. So if we open, maybe in Q4, we open X account, we open X plus 40% of X. It means almost 40% up delta in Q1 of 2020-21 through Selfie specifically. And again, to adapt with the Selfie, because with Selfie we can open the account, but we cannot allow them to transact beyond 1 lakh. We cannot allow those customers to transact beyond 1 lakh without doing complete KYC. So now we have come up with video KYC as well. So Selfie plus video KYC, complete acquisition can be done without any face-to-face interaction. So these are some interesting facts, and what I feel, this is the future as well. Thanks a lot. Thank you very much.
Thank
So
you.
it's just example. Right. Thank you, sir.
You are young, and the future belongs to you. We have many more questions with us, but I'm sorry, because of the time constraint, I will not be able to take up any more questions. My apologies to the concerned participants. We have now come to the end of the webinar. It started off very well with Mr. Guha painting a graphic picture of the banking today and what is likely to happen tomorrow. He made 3 important points. One is merger poses great challenges to see the effectiveness. Second one is COVID or no COVID, any government package, anything that comes, it casts high responsibility on the banks, because the last mile branch manager. The third point that Mr. Guha made is risk management is always important for banks, but it has become much more important now because of the COVID. Mr. Ghosh made a detailed analysis of NPA and explained how RBI and the banks are now trying to manage the situation. Mr. Nadkarni gave us the rationale behind establishment of small finance banks and payment banks, and he explained how, despite operational restrictions, these banks are winning over through digitalization. All through these deliberations that we have seen today, runs the thread of optimism. All the three speakers have ended with a note of optimism. And in fact, if you go to history, you'll see that last century, Spanish flu couldn't defeat us. Great Depression, Mr. Ghosh has already explained how we won over it. World War II, yes, we have gone through it. The global financial crisis of the last decade, this many of us know, we have seen these things. And these things have not been able to defeat the human spirit. I am an optimist as well. I have strong faith in human spirit. So I end with this note of hope. I'll give two examples in support of this. One is that immediately after this first phase of lockdown was declared, the unemployment rate in our country went up to 23.5%. So high. And last month, June, unemployment rate has come down to 11%. Some industries, they started working, and some labor, they have gone back. So it has come down to 11%. Second example I would like to give is, Fitch has forecast India to grow at the rate of 9.5% next fiscal. These are two small examples, but they are indicators of the things to come. My immense thanks go to the panel members. I am immensely grateful to Mr. Guha, Mr. Ghosh, and Mr. Nadkarni for their deliberation. I thank the participants for their participation, for raising questions, and my special thanks go to Dr. Jose Hernandez from Mexico. Before I end, there is a small announcement. We have our next webinar on 24th July. The theme is Positive Thinking and New Look at Happiness. This may sound a little bit unusual, but yes, it's very much appropriate during these stressful times. And this webinar will be moderated by Dr. Smarati Patnaik, and I hope we'll see you there in that webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Guha, thank you, Mr. Ghosh, and thank you, Mr. Nadkarni.
Thank you so much. Have a nice evening, everybody.
Yes, thank you.